Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Brandy McGee and I bring you witch history and makeup twice a week. So if that sounds awesome to you, definitely hit that subscribe button if you don't mind, as I'm trying to grow. And what I do is I talk about witch history and I do my makeup at the same time. So if that sounds awesome, like I say, stay for the party because it's going to be a good one, especially today. But anyways, thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate it. And yeah, let's go ahead and get this party started. So the time period is the late 1500s, okay, early 1600s. We're in Scotland, all right. And this story does kind of go all over the place, but don't worry, I'm going to guide you guys along as best I can. But this is the trial of the North Berwick witches, okay? And how this all got started is the most bizarre thing I've ever heard, to be honest. But we're gonna get there and all that fun stuff. But let's talk about what's happening during this time right now, okay? Right now, during this time in Scotland, Catholics are considered witches. Yeah. So everybody is trying to be Protestant because remember the Witchcraft Act had passed, right? But nobody was very clear on what exactly that meant. They just passed it. And so people just were saying it's idolatry, heresy, blasphemy, not being a Protestant. And yeah, all of those were signs that you could be a witch. And of course, you have to think of old Henrik Kramer, who we've talked about before, who wrote the Malefars Malacarium. Yeah, that dude. This is the time when his book has already been published, and it's like flying off the shelves. Yeah, everybody now. There's so many books that's being written about it. It's pretty crazy. His book's flying off the shelves, and guess who decides to take an interest in witches? Well, actually, it was taught. It's like taught to the royals, to the kings and princes and queens and stuff. It was like common knowledge that you need to know for some reason. Now enter King James the Sixth. Yes, oh, King James. Y'all knew that man was going. His name's eventually gonna come up in this madness, okay? So, some facts about him that were very interesting to me that I did not know about. Okay, obviously he really liked witchcraft. He thought that it's not that he liked it. He wasn't a witch or nothing like that. He was just very interested. Like it kind of consumed him, to be honest with you. And you'll see it after a while when I get to telling y'all this story. But he becomes very interested in this. And so there's like 45 books that have been written about demonology by the time King James is in his 20s, And he is wanting to. First, hold on, let's back up and I'll tell you about his mom real quick. First off, the man had a complex, all right? He had a complex when it came to women. Surprise, surprise. But I'll tell you why. His mom was Mary, Queen of Scots. She was accused of offing her husband, yeah. And then right after, she married the guy that they were accusing that actually did it. So that made her look incredibly guilty. So she has little tiny baby King James. He's like an infant. And they take him away from her and give him with some foster parents and crown him as the king. Let me mute my computer real quick. Lord have mercy on my soul. Anyways. And so he was brought up by these different foster parents and things like that. And of course they were royals and yada yada yada. But at the same time, it wasn't his mom. But she does come back around. She does. She decides that she wants to come back around and do bad things again. Like you haven't already done enough, right? You already killed the man's father, so anyway. So his mom is just straight up nuts, and so she kills his father's foster dad. Yeah, kills his foster dad. Okay, and then the person that replaced him was executed. Okay, And then the person that replaced that one got accused of seducing the king. And so he got pushed out. He got exiled, even though that was the king's little man. It was his boyfriend. Yes, he was gay. James was gay. Yes, he was. King James was a gay man. He did not like women. He did not like the company of women. He wasn't like the other guy we were talking about who really enjoyed the company of women. He did not. He was always in the company of men. And this bothered the Queen Elizabeth, right, of England. She's like, how are you going to produce male heirs if you just keep hanging out with dudes all day, you know? Like, that's all they thought about back then, obviously. And so this wasn't, the correct thing for him to do, was to hang out with a bunch of dudes. He was supposed to be finding a wife and get married. And so Queen Elizabeth's like, all right, I found somebody for you. And her name is Anna. By the way, his mom ends up getting dealt with in a very bad way. So Queen Elizabeth was like, all right, your mom, she kills his mom, Mary, Queen of Scots. She's deceased now, okay? And now he's got another woman telling him what to do. Am I right? He's got the Queen of England saying, hey, you need to find a bride, you need to get married, and all this other kind of stuff. Well, like I say, he does have a slight complex, as you should, And, but he eventually, takes the bait and is like, okay, I'm going to get married. And the Queen of Elizabeth, Lord mercy. Queen Elizabeth of England said, no, you're going to get married. I have somebody for you. Her name's Anna. And she's 14. Yeah, 14 years old. And she's going to marry and become the Queen of Scotland. So, in 1589, King James is set to marry Anna, the daughter of a Danish-Norwegian king. Okay? And they have some difficulties. Yeah, they do. Unfortunately. And so because Scotland was in such turmoil, and this was happening before James was born, Scotland had been in famine and turmoil, and of course that had brought up, previous witch trials and things of that matter. And so he was, it was an arranged marriage, but, he knows that he has to fulfill his duty. And so he's like, and the man, I will say this about him. He don't half-ass nothing. He don't. So once he said that he's going to marry this woman, he's set on it, okay? Now, her ships try to leave because normally the girl comes to the man, the king, or whatnot, to get married. They tried to leave their port 6 times. And on the 6th try, the ship got a hole in it, somehow got damaged, and they had to stop in Oslo, in Norway. And so Anna ends up writing James a letter. She's like, what's up, man? My bad, but we kept running into some storms, so I'm going to stay here for the winter. And there's, there's nothing I can really fucking do. So I'm sorry. Well, I'm sure she didn't say it like that. But when he got the letter, he was like, no, I want to marry her now. So I'm leaving and I'm going to go get her. So the king's like, bet. I'm going to go and fetch my wife. Watch this. Hold my beer. I'm going to go and do this, right? And so that's what he does. He gets a ship to everybody's surprise. Yeah, he likes to surprise people. He gets on the ship and he sails to Norway, to Oslo. And him and Anna get married in November of that year of 1589. Yeah. And they get married in Oslo, and they're spending some time with her family during the holidays. It's so close to Christmas. And her family is discussing whether or not if it was witches that had messed with Anna's fleet when she was trying to get to the king. Okay? And the king didn't really think anything of it at the time. And so, but they ended up staying in Norway for until May, until better weather, and it's not so cold and all that other kind of stuff. Ice in the seas can bust up their boats and all that stuff. So they waited it out. And then when they leave for Scotland, they come into the craziest weather they say that they've ever had. They've never had this much weather ever. And it's tried to derail his ships, but they do make it. They make it to Scotland. They do. But by this time now, James is convinced. King James is like, hey, this is nefarious. There's something happening here. So there's some witches about. I think that your family was right. And so that's what he just decides to do. He decides to become a witch hunter. Yes. King James decides to become a witch hunter. Also, when he got back, he found out that a man named Peter Pallidus, who was like in his little circle, and he had also wrote a demonology book, was giving the witches a heads up by saying, hey, the king is disguising people as couriers to come to your house and ask for your magical help. And then once you help them with your magical help, they're going to arrest you and they're going to kill you. And so that man put out that warning, and King James didn't like that. He didn't like doing that. He's like, no. So the first thing he did is he had to start cleaning house, right? He had to start cleaning house at his own house, start looking at his own inner circle. And at this point, royals were not, I know in stories before, I always talked about how the royal people got off. Well, there was a man named Sir William Stuart in 1568. So there's a little while. He was executed for using magic to predict the future of the monarchy and, I guess, a way to kill the regent. And so that showed how magical treason could work. And King James saw that, and he was like, oh my God, anybody could be a witch. So this whole entire ship situation has put everybody on edge. King James thinks that there are witches out to get him, okay? And yeah, that's not a good thing to be on his bad side. And like I say, he was already looking at his inner circle, and so I think he did get rid of some. Oh, I got sleep in my eyes still. My bad. Anyways, so we come to a woman named it's Gilly. That's what they call her. Her nickname, but her real name was Gillias Duncan, but they call her Gilly. Okay. Now Gilly worked for a man named David, and what she did was like change sheets, change bedding, take out chamber pots or whatnot. You know what I mean? She was a maidservant, and she loved to stay out late, which I guess was not a good thing to do for women back then. She had a very vast knowledge in plants. She would go and gather grasses and roots, and people saw her do that. She loved to help the community, and she loved to help heal. And so David, her employer, didn't like this because in his mind, a woman can't have medical knowledge because we're not smart enough, I guess. And so he decides he's going to take it upon himself to question and torture her. This is very unethical and freaking illegal, but he does it anyway. And he uses like thumb screws to torture her with. So then it was at this time that she confessed and pointed the finger at somebody else. There's going to be a lot of finger pointing in this video, you guys. She pointed to a lady named Agnes. Now, Agnes, oh, blessed Agnes. Her nickname is Annie, so we'll say Annie. She was a very Christian woman, okay, this person. She used the power of prayer to heal people. If anybody was feeling bad about themselves, or, they got to that point where they're so depressed, they couldn't get out of bed, they couldn't function, their family's worried about them, they called Annie to come in and help. Because she knew things that had been passed down through her family, of course. And she was using like the Apostles' Creed to help people heal and things like that. But all of this to them, because she was talking to deities, she was using charms and things like that. So to King James, this is really close to Catholicism, so she must be a witch. Now, Annie was suspected of helping a man's wife, magically, obviously. She said that her and her daughter had gotten attacked by a black dog. Okay, now most people would think it's a physical black dog, but I think it's the depression, anxiety, the melancholy, and that's what they call the black dog. You know what I mean? I don't think it was actually like a physical dog. I really don't. I just think it meant, hey, we're sad. We're like really, really sad, and we need some help. And so she would come with her charms, her prayers, and all this fun stuff. And so she would go to the dog, supposedly, if there was a dog there, or she would ask the dog who was going to live in the family. And so for this man, his name was Patrick Edmondson, Lady Edmondson would die, and 2 of her 3 daughters would live. And so then Annie decides she uses her healing powers and all this other stuff. She has certain prayers from her dad. She's just a Christian woman, but being in contact with the devil dog was heresy, dude. Like, straight up. People did not like. But my question is, if she's talking to a dog, okay, these women brought it to her attention first. You know, they're just asking for her help. Kind of like Titua when making that little cake. She was just asked for help. It was just like, hey, can you help me to do this, you know? And, yeah. So that's what happened. Anyway, so Annie in her mind was a Christian who used the power to heal. Prayer. The Apostles' Creed. I mean, it wasn't exactly the Apostles' Creed. Her daddy had taught her a different version, I'm guessing. To her, she was just helping people. She wasn't doing witchcraft. She didn't say she was a witch. She never said that. She was a healer. She was somebody that used the power of prayer to help heal people in their time of need, whether they were depressed or sad or whatnot, you know. And I can imagine that during this time in Scotland, a lot of people probably were very upset and sad over the famine, losing lots and lots of people because they can't keep the place clean. You know, I mean, a lot of things had happened by then. And so everybody's kind of looking to the king as like a savior to save them from all these witches that are doing all these terrible things. But his main goal was to find out who sent the storm to stop his wife from coming and marrying him. That's his whole goal. His whole goal is to find out who created the storm or who damaged her ship. How did they do it is what he wants to know. Annie is also an empath. So what she does for these people, okay, like I say, she puts a charm under the bed, a charm under the pillow. She says the Apostles' Creed. She also says it to Ave Maria. And then she will take that person's pain away from them and take it on as her own. And she'll writhe in pain and all night just fighting this depression that she's taken out of this person. And the next day she'll throw it to the dogs, supposedly. I guess she'll just speak it out the window and throw it outside, basically, to get rid of that emotion so that she could go back to her normal self. And then her patient would start to slowly feel better. Of course, we have a Karen. Yeah, we have a Karen in the story. But her name is Janet. Janet Kennedy said that Annie had summoned her, but she said, I didn't want to go. Right? She's like, I'm not going. Well, she said the courier told her that if she didn't come, then Annie will just make her come by magic. If she didn't come to her house or whatnot, she would just make her do it. Magic. And so to her, to this woman, Janet, she ends up getting questioned herself. Janet, when you open your mouth and you start talking, you should just sit there and just be quiet sometimes. Imagine how much you learn when you sit there and you just be quiet for a little bit. You know what I mean? like I say, Annie, she used deities. She called on deities for help, but that was part of her religion. She's Catholic. I don't think she's Protestant. I'm pretty sure she wasn't. Not if she was using deities, because that was totally against the rules for the Protestants. Like, no, no. The only person you can talk to is God and Jesus. That's it. There is no Mother Mary. You know, they canceled all that out. So, anyway, that's the Protestant religion for you. But as we know, the Catholics survive, so they always will, because they're awesome. Anyways, so when Janet, this made her, kind of look bad, because make Janet look bad, because it was like, why was Annie sending somebody to your house anyway? So she's questioned, along with Jilly. Don't forget about her. They were questioned, and they pointed the finger, and they said Annie's behind the whole entire storm. It was all her. This was all James needed to hear. This is what he'd been waiting for. This is what he's been waiting for, right? He wanted to hear exactly. Now he knows who it is. Now he wants to know exactly how it happens. So when he gets wind of the confessions, he sends them to Edinburgh, to his own house called Holy Road House. I laughed when I read the name. I'm sorry. And he would attend. He's going to do the trial at his house. This is the King of Scotland. Is going to do this at his own house because he's taken it so personal. Okay? You see, in James' mind, he was like a God. He was like God on earth. To him, he represented God on earth. He was above everybody. Better than everybody, right? No, not so much. But anyways, and so Annie and Gilly are questioned, right? And let me tell y'all, some stories start flying out, and they're bonkers. But they ended up torturing them first, of course. And what they did to Annie, I'm gonna give you a disclaimer. It's not very nice, but I'm gonna tell y'all what they did, and I'll give you the warning before I say it. So first they questioned her, and then they shaved her head, like shaved all the hair off of her, so they could check for marks. Remember the marks that the demonologists think that these women have? Like it could be a birthmark, it could be a mole, it could be anything, some kind of mark on your body, and that makes you a witch, and which is just bonkers to me. And so anyway, then now Annie was a tough woman. She was a tough woman. She stood hard in her faith. She did. They put her head in between rope and would twist it back and forth like that on her head. And she withstood that. Yeah, they did this for an hour. An hour. I can't even imagine being tortured for 2 minutes, much less an hour, and still saying, I'm not a witch. I'm not who you guys think I am. I'm not that person, But it gets to the point, and James, let me tell you, King James loves every single moment of this. He delights in it. He is happy that this is happening to this woman, that he's getting to do this to this woman, because they attacked him. So he has every right. He's above everybody. He can do whatever he wants, right? Okay, so here's the heads up. Little essay here. Sorry. I didn't do it. So they couldn't find any marks on her, on her head, after they shaved her and cut off all that. They didn't shave it, I'm sure they just cut it all off and was looking. So then they went deeper, and they went down to her private parts. And that's when she was like, I'm done. Like, I will tell you anything you want to know. Just stop touching me down there. Like, seriously. Now, Jilly is still running her mouth and saying that Annie has done all the things. She says that she had been trying to stop this wedding for a year. And so that Annie had been trying to stop the wedding for a year. Yeah. And she also said that Annie said that she will fetch his wife before he even gets to her. which is kind of a hardcore threat, you know. And so then she says that the devil comes to her, right? The devil comes to her and said that the king should hardly come home and that should never come home. And the devil was with them, both of them, Annie and Jilly. And so evidently she was trying to say that the devil was not wanting James to come back with a wife. Why the devil would care who this man is marrying, I don't know. Even there's not even a devil anyway. So that's just my opinion, though, on that little part right there. Y'all can believe what you want to believe, and I will fully support that, you know, because that's just who I am. So, anyways, she said that she was present on their wedding night in Norway. Let me tell y'all this madness, okay? Said she was present in Norway on his wedding night. Now, you got to imagine back then, on the wedding night, there's a lot of people in the room. They want to make sure this is happening. Like they used to make sure they consummate the marriage by literally watching. Yes. And so Anna had whispered something to James on their wedding night. And Anna repeated it to him and whispered it in his ear. That was all the confirmation. If he didn't need any more, that was more to pile on top. So he was like, oh, no. This confirmed all of his fears. But this was likely overheard by servants and the other people that were in the room. Okay. People run their mouth. They talk. So that's probably how she learned of this whispering to the king on his wedding night, you know. Even though there was probably like 6 people in the room. I mean, I can't imagine that at all, but it happened, you know. Now, Annie and Julie were both very much so uneducated. They didn't have any money. They were very, very poor, especially Annie. Because, you know, most of the time they just helped people because they could, you know. They weren't really looking for a payment or anything like that. Not people like Annie, who's really steadfast in their faith. You know what I mean? She really wanted to help people. And anyway, so when she was asked how she started serving the devil, of course, James is asking all the questions. It's like, how did you even start coming to like do this? And she said, well, he came to me with money. And he was like, here's some money. Even though she was the poorest person in the whole freaking village that she lived in, evidently the devil gave her some money to follow him. That's what she says. And of course, King James is eating it all up. This is confirming all of his suspicions. Okay. Like literally all of them. Now I'm about to give y'all a whole list of the stuff these women said that they did. All right. As much as I would love to be able to remember it all, that's not possible for my old self. So, Annie and Jilly said they created the storm by sending a black dog to go underneath the ship and damage it. What's up with the black dog? Like, I feel bad for my dog, Oil Pan. She's black, obviously, because her name is Oil Pan. And I feel bad for her. Why has everybody got to put it off on the black dog? But anyway, I digress. It's fine. And so, then they say at Leith, they christened a cat, oh my God, and threw it into the sea along with limbs of dead men that they had robbed from graves. I'm sorry, but these ladies got some nice imaginations on them, let me tell you. Obviously, y'all, this is all false confessions because they're being tortured, these women, okay? They're too poor. They can't have lawyers, not like Helena did. Remember? Helena had a lawyer. She lawyered up. She had money. These women did not have any of that. They were very, 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 very much so poor. Also, they had conventions across Scotland to plot against the king. And this is where the devil explained to them how to harm the king. Okay? He tells them to make a mold of King James, like his picture, you know, a mold of him out of wax. And then they tell them, and then he tells them to melt it, knowing that, thinking that it's going to dissolve the king's life. Now, this is like using a poppet in a cord cut or something like that. You know what I mean? We know that it's really just, I mean, technically that's magic. I'm not gonna lie, because that's using a poppet to bring harm to somebody. So, but these women, they knew, they've heard stories from other places, and they knew the things to say because there was nothing else they could say, or they would be tortured, and they wanted the torture to stop. Now Satan did tell them to kill and roast a frog, hanging it upside down for the poison to come out into an oyster shell. And then they would mix the person that they were targeting's skin and urine into it. And they could use it, and then they would gather the poison and put it on put it all together, and then use it on people's clothing, basically to poison them. That's what they said. They hung a frog upside down from a tree. It dripped out poison. They were going to use this poison to put on somebody's clothes so that way they would get sick. This is what the devil told them to do, supposedly. Okay. Now, the Scottish branch met at North Berwick. So that's why they're the North Berwick witches. This is their biggest Sabbath. They call it a Sabbath because, this is all unholy things that we're talking about, of course, at the time. So, the biggest one, over 100 people were there. 6 men, and the rest of them were women. It took place in North Berwick Church because the devil said to. Yes, all these 100 witches broke into the church using magic and started talking with the devil, who's like literally standing at the pulpit. Was a black man dressed in all black, and he was standing there like he was going to be the preacher, like he was going to preach to them. So they're all running and dancing and skipping through the churchyard and singing and doing all this, stuff. And they go inside and they meet the devil. And like I say, he's a black man. He's all dressed in black and staying at the pulpit like he's a preacher. This is everything opposite of what they thought was good. Okay. So this was just like music to James' ears. He's like, tell me more. Tell me more. So then they pointed the finger at a man named John Theon, who was accused of being at this big Sabbath and taking attendance and making notes also. Yeah. We'll come back to him a little bit later on. Another man named Robert Grierson was given a promotion by the devil. Yeah. The devil was up there giving out promotions, like asking them, what kind of bad shit have you done today? And okay, here's your star. Here's your pat on the back. I don't know how they didn't laugh, but it is what it is. This was serious, dude. This is serious now. So during this, the devil turns around, but when the congregation is like, oh my gosh, are we fixing to have to do something that we don't want to do? Or what? And all he does is turn around, lift up the back of his black cloak, and tells all the witches to kiss his ass. And they do. I mean, none of this happened, right? But that's what they say happened. They kissed the devil's ass. Yeah. And then, after they did that, they went and dug up some bodies. Yeah. Out of the graveyard. And then Annie grounded the bodies down. Okay? Grinding them down supposedly into a powder. Then when she was asked, hey, can we see some evidence of that, please? Oh, I lost it. Yeah. You didn't lose that shit. You know what I mean? She didn't lose it. Never happened. So there you go. Anyway, there was no evidence of it. And so after Annie's confession along with Jilly, they went back to the Holy Road house to be jailed and to sit there with all the other suspects that they named. Y'all, this man kept this trial going for a whole solid year. Legit. That's how many people he was trying to get on board with this. Trying to get them to say they were witches. So the courts, okay, so now we got to talk about the courts. The courts had a lot of shit to go through, right? They have a lot of accusations flying around, and they had a lot of things to go through. They had to compare stories, talk to suspects, talk to accused, all this other things, but they didn't really do their due diligence, unfortunately, because if they would have, they would have found out that everything the women told them was not true. I mean, you didn't see them flying to the church. You would have seen 100 witches flying to your church through the air. Everybody would be like, oh, what's that? Coming from the sky, so they knew that they didn't have any evidence to back it up, but they didn't want to take back what they said, the courts. So they went on ahead and went on with the trial. The only thing the courts knew, okay, was that they had tried to drown Her Majesty. That's the only thing that the courts were saying, that she had tried to do that. Okay, like, yes, we know the finger's been pointed to her, but here goes like a whole bunch of more fingers being pointed out. Okay, so now they start questioning Jilly again, and she starts pointing the finger. She names people from different towns. Yeah, she's like, okay, so I bought so Barbara Napier was accused of using Annie's magic to help her husband gain favor with like the king's couriers. I'm not sure what that means. If he wanted to be a courier or something and was trying to get his way in, I don't know. But I imagine that is like a royal position, so that would be something that her husband would want. But not only that, she also bought an anti-nausea charm from Annie and an enchanted ring. No, excuse me, not poisonous. And that was said that she killed the Earl of Agnes using using a wax image. No. Lord have mercy on my soul. Anyways, let's keep it moving. So now we have Miss Euphane McAlzine, but her nickname is Effie. She's accused of bewitching her father-in-law and husband. Consulted with Annie about the family's health. Annie actually eased her labor pains by scattering charms around her bed. And one, they said, was a rock that had a hole in it. Well, that's a hagstone. Obviously, they have those everywhere. It's Scotland. That's where I get my hagstones, actually, from Scotland. So she used the hagstone in a written petition to help Effie with the pain of having a child. But to everybody else, this was witchcraft. But Effie had also stepped out on her marriage. Okay. And that right there is treason in itself, because you don't do that. You don't step out. Like, I mean, I'm sure it was totally cool for the dudes to do it, but it's not cool for the women to do it at all. So they had to be subservient and do every single thing their husband ever said, right? And so she was having an extramarital affair, and both of them were tried. Effie was tried. She tried to get a lawyer because, obviously she was married. She had money. But it didn't matter, because it's King James. He's higher than everybody in the entire land, right? Yeah, he is the top dog. He is God on earth, basically, is what he's saying. And so, unfortunately, we come to the end of Annie's trial. January 27th of 1591. He drugged this woman through dirt for a year. Like, make it make sense. She was found guilty. She was taken to Edinburgh Castle, where she was prisoned, and then she was killed at the stake, and her body burned on the pyre that they built. And that was the end of Agnes Sampson, unfortunately. Now, Jilly, she was still alive, and she was still being questioned by December of 1591. So she's been in this for like almost 2 years now. And she's tried with a girl named Bessie Thompson. And Bessie Thompson is actually Annie's daughter. So you got 2 generations they get accused in this trial. 2 generations of the family are accused in this trial. Now, remember John Fionn, the guy that was taking attendance and making notes? Well, he got in a lot more trouble because he was doing magic tricks. He said that he could tell the future. He liked to do people's horoscopes. He knew a lot about astrology. And so they thought that he was a witch. So he was tortured with hammers and metal leggings before he was executed. Like, talk about sitting there wishing and praying, like, just please, can we get to the execution part? Like, for real, can we just get to that part? I mean, I feel so bad. This is so terrible. Billy and Bessie were executed side by side on December 4th, 1591. Yeah. Barbara was acquitted. Okay, but, you know, the jury had come back and acquitted her. But the king went to the jury and was like, what? She's what? No. Change your verdict. So they changed it to guilty. They did. But with this one, with Miss Barbara, she was pregnant at the time when she received her sentence. So technically they didn't want to burn a pregnant woman, you know. I don't blame them, because that's not a good idea at all. None of this is a good idea, but it's history, and so here we are. She was pregnant, and she literally, she just disappeared. Like, she never got executed. She left. I think she left Scotland altogether. She left the town. I think she left the country, and we have never heard another word about Barbara. Nope, ever since. Unfortunately, Effie was going to be on the chopping block as well. And hers was because of the marital treason, basically. Her cheating on her husband. I'm not sure if that baby was her husband's or was the guy she was having a little side party with or whatnot. But she was actually burned alive. Like, with Annie, they choked her and then burned her. Like, choked her until she was no longer and then burned her. But with Effie, they just straight up tied her to a post and lit her on fire like you'd see in American Horror Story Coven, you know? I mean, and this was just for being an undutiful wife. Someone who had tried to murder her husband and her father-in-law and was seducing other men. She was burned at the stake for that, Effie. Yeah. Like, I'm telling you, these women just wanting to have the ability to do their own spirituality, believe in whatever religion they wanted to believe in, to keep passing on these wonderful herbal remedies and things of that matter that they could help people with, that they knew that worked. You know, I don't ever see why working with plants, how that's a bad thing. My dad's whole entire wall is an apothecary, and he handpicked all of those herbs. And he definitely was not a witch, although he was a Freemason, so that's pretty close if you ask me. Yeah. Then in 1597, James writes a demonology book saying that witches were submissive threats. Now, there was one person that didn't get anything bad happen to him whatsoever, and his name was the Earl of Bothwell. Okay, he was the instigator of the storm, evidently. Like, Annie provided the magic, but this man was like the one that put the idea in their head, supposedly. And let me tell you, he's acquitted because he was a man, a nobleman, a king's courier, and had legal advice as well. Oh yeah, he was allowed to have legal advice, but then again, he's an earl, so he has the money to do that. These other women didn't have that choice. And he's a man, so they gave him a pass. He didn't give old John a pass, though. Let me tell you, that's pretty bad. So, but yeah, that is the story of the North Berwick trials in Scotland, and basically how James, King James, changed the word from poisoner in the Bible to witch, even though, as an herbalist, and if my dad was still here, he would attest to this. You have to know poisons in order to cure them. Because if you have somebody come to you and they're like having these certain symptoms and they just all of a sudden came on, all of a sudden, they have to know what poison that is in order for them to find the remedy for it. That's what a lot of people don't understand when it comes to healing with herbs and things like that. But that's okay. You know, he changes it. And the sad thing is that the word witch still has a stigma attached to it. I literally have to say the word healer in front of my mother because it makes her so uncomfortable to say witch. Although that's not happening anymore. I am a witch. Point blank period. Yeah. So old King James liked men, didn't like women because he had his mom doing crazy stuff. The queen was telling him what to do. And then he tries to go and do all these things that he's supposed to do. And the storm comes up and it just all creates a huge storm, especially with Henrik writing the Malacarum book. And then that inspired more people to write more books. And so by the time King James was, old enough to understand, and he started to study demonology and he wanted to apply it. And he wrote a book about how he did it. And it was always by torture. They would always torture somebody to get a confession. They will say anything that you want to hear if you're being tortured. So how they could think that was a good thing, I don't know, But it is what it is. That's our story for today. Just remember that the witches were healers. They still are. They're not... like I said earlier, I don't even believe in the devil. I don't. I know there's evil out there because there's good. You can't have the darkness without the light. Light casts shadows, blah, blah, blah. So, at the end of the day, if one of your friends is a witch and you have a problem with that, that's on you. You need to break away from the stigma of people saying the word witch and it being a bad thing. Because I actually have a lot of knowledge, especially because of my dad, on herbs and how to use them, what they're for, medicinally and magically. So, if you feel like you want to get into some witch stuff, go right on ahead and do it. You can tell anybody you want, or you can stay in the closet for 20 years like I did. I stayed in the closet for 20 years to save my mom's face. And I'm not doing that anymore. So, set your boundaries. And remember, nobody's told you today, I love you, okay? And you are worth everything. So, love yourself.